The views expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of WPSL, but we are the culprits who put you up to like it and sharing it on your favorite social media and with all your friends and neighbors, because it's time for a special edition of the African American scene on day number 7 of Black History Month. So here he is, without any further ado, the one, the only, Rudy Howard.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. Always glad to be with you, and I'm glad to be back on my regular Wednesday nights. So, welcome, welcome, welcome. Well, for Black History Month, as you know, it's my tradition. I give a prize for answering a trivia question. And tonight, you're going to get your first question. And if you answer it correctly, the YMCA has been so gracious as to provide me with raffle tickets for the Easter House. The Easter House is a home that you could win with the raffle or $250,000, either one. So it's certainly worth your while to try and get an answer. Let's see here. The first question. This is not going to be an easy one. You got to do a little work to get the answer. I want to know, who was the first Black player allowed to play in the ACC and what year? The first African American player allowed to play in the ACC and what year? Okay, so if you get the answer to that question, you're going to get a raffle ticket for the Easter House. I don't have them yet, but I know they're on the way. So I will get the tickets. If you win the ticket, I will get the ticket over to the radio station so you can stop by there and pick it up. Okay? So, African American History Month. This is always something that I enjoy because I endeavor to provide you with information that I'm sure many of you have not had before. There was a book that I read by John Grisham called A Time to Kill. And in that book, the first 15 pages give a graphic description of a rape and a beating of a young Black girl. It actually was so bad at the time. I was riding the train back and forth to New York that I almost put it down, but I continued to read it, and it was quite a good book. If you saw the movie A Time to Kill, I can't see the name. Okay.
Miles.
Okay, I have a caller on line 1. Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Miles. Miles would like to try the contest.
Okay. I don't hear him. Okay, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going for now. He can call back if he'd like. Okay, so if you saw the movie A Time to Kill, Samuel Jackson killed the man who raped and brutalized his daughter because he was unsure of whether or not he was going to get a fair trial. And in that trial, Matthew McConaughey does the summation on behalf of Samuel Jackson and his defense. And one of the things that he does, in his closing, he gives that graphic description of what happened to the young lady. And then he says to the jury, now, I want you to think she was white. And there wasn't a dry eye in the jury after he gave that description. Now, I know it was only a movie, but The approach he took in that summation is something that I thought was very interesting. But we got Miles on the phone again.
Turn your radio down, Miles.
Okay.
All right. Talk on the phone. Keep the phone in your ear.
Okay.
Okay, I'm listening.
Gerald Hill.
Who?
Gerald Hill.
Daryl Mills?
Hill. Gerald Hill.
What school?
Do you remember it? Wasn't it University of Maryland? Is it University?
I can't hear you.
Is it University of Maryland?
You got the wrong name.
Zero.
Right school, wrong name.
Oh.
Okay, let me continue.
All right.
Thank you for calling.
Take care.
Okay. Tonight, I'm going to take you on a journey. I'm going to ask you to not be defensive, but to open your mind and your heart and absorb the information that I'm about to give you. And try to put yourself, I'm asking you to get outside of your body and put yourself in this information that I'm about to share. Imagine that you have lived your life on a plantation for 250 years. That's 12 generations. You and your ancestors have never known freedom. Your family has lived and died on the plantation. You never owned your children or your wife. The nuclear family was frequently broken apart. Sons and daughters sold or given to the children of the plantation owner. Many slaves fought on the side of the Confederate Army. Many slaves fought on the side of the Confederate Army. Some fought by choice and others by mandate and there were about 3,000 slaves who participated on the side of the Confederates. And we got a caller?
Yes, Miles going to try it again.
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead, Miles.
Player Billy Jones.
What did you say?
Player Billy Jones. Billy Jones.
Okay, that's close. And what year?
Do you remember this? 1965.
Yes.
Ooh, ding, 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 winner.
You win. Okay. Cliff, take his name.
All right. I'll get his name and number for you off the air and
Yes.
get him taken care of.
Okay. Okay, let's continue the journey. The allegiance to the master was so strong, some slaves fought to protect slavery. So why would they do that? If the Confederate Army was successful, it would have given them favor with the master, even though that meant their fellow ancestors would continue to be enslaved. During the Civil War, slaves were eventually allowed to serve in the military for the Union. White soldiers were paid $13 a month, and there was no equipment deduction. Okay. Winnie?
How you doing?
Okay.
I heard that I heard that white soldiers got paid more than black soldiers back then.
Yes, they did. That's what I was just talking about.
Well, anyway, I'm trying to answer your trivia question.
Oh, somebody already answered it.
What you did? It did.
Yeah, what's your answer?
Bill Jones,
What school?
he went to Maryland in 1965 to 1966.
Okay. So we got two winners. All right, I'm gonna give you a raffle ticket also, Winnie. Okay. So Cliff's gonna take down your information and give you a call.
All right. Winnie is a winner.
Okay.
Hang on, Winnie. I'll get your information on the phone. Hang on.
The black soldiers who served were paid $10 a month, and they had a clothing deduction of $3 for a net pay of $7. They fought bravely to the surprise of many. From 1861 to 1865, the Civil War was fought, and it was about slavery that made the country rich due to the cotton industry. Now, you have some conservatives that try to say the Civil War was not fought about slavery, but it was. In 1865, the slave population was set free, approximately 4 million. The country tried to correct some of the potential problems by creating the Freedmen's Bureau, whose job it was to help slaves transition with employment and expanded educational opportunities. Most of the southern states ignored the program. Now, here's where I want you to try to imagine this. Try to imagine you're set free, you have no means of employment, you have no home, no money, no food, and no property. You have skills that you are not allowed to use that have been developed from your time on the plantation. Can you imagine what that must have felt like? You are free and you now have to start from nothing. Is this pulling up yourself by the bootstraps? Eventually, many slaves opted for sharecropper agreements, which meant the landowner divided up his plantation into separate units. Slaves were provided lodging and the land to work in exchange for sharecropper agreements. 50% of the earnings from the crops went to the landowner. If you did not opt for one of these agreements and sought to make it on your own, there was a strong chance you would end up in post-slave camps or forced labor camps. It was against the law for you to not have a job. And if you were deemed to be a vagrant, they would lock you up or send you to a plantation owner. If you ended up at a Union camp, you were simply considered a burden. The newly freed slaves experienced unspeakable poverty. Here's the part you never hear about, which is very important. Everybody tells you, okay, they're free, and oh, what a great celebration. It just wasn't like that. There was rampant disease. This was considered the first major biological disease period of the 20th century. Much of the disease was caused by unsanitary conditions they were forced to live in. The free slaves suffered from cholera, smallpox, and malnutrition. And approximately 1 million died from these conditions. While you have been taught to celebrate the African Americans' freedom from slavery, this information has largely been kept from the public. In the book, Sick from Freedom, the author, Jim Downs, went back and found this pertinent health information associated with slaves. I am now reading this book, and I can't tell you how horrible it was for those free people. The law attempted to help, but it was largely ignored. The law was there to help, but it was not obeyed. Then came the new restrictions in the form of Black codes and Jim Crow laws, which were designed to hamper the slaves' newly found freedom. So they're free from the slave laws, and then they get hammered again with Jim Crow and Black codes. Now, just imagine now, this is what you're going through as you have been freed. Keep in mind, the 13th Amendment was passed in 1865. The 14th Amendment was passed in 1868. And the 15th in 1870. Those are commonly referred to as the Reconstruction laws, because those were the laws that gave rights to the newly freed slaves. Most of the slaves had a very deep faith in God. For many, it was all that kept them sane and offered hope. There are no immigrants in this country that have come to these shores who have had to repeatedly endure such mass hardships. Here is the caveat. While experiencing all of this trauma, African Americans have fought to protect the American dream in every war. I would like for you to ponder whether or not you would have felt compelled to go to war for a country that treated you this way. Were they patriots? Here's some questions that I hope listeners will call and answer for me. How long should it take for African Americans to overcome this past? Do you think there has been long-term damage from slavery? Does this information portray lazy people? Does this give you a picture of people who are criminals? Was the pay in the Civil War white privilege? Over this month, I will get into Reconstruction period in depth. And I'm sure there's much about that you don't know. But right now, if you have the courage, I would like for some of you to call and answer these questions. Some of these questions are questions that I have often got from some of my conservative friends. How long should it take for African Americans to overcome this past? Do you think that this past created long-term damage? Does this picture that I painted for you portray lazy people? Does this picture that I've painted for you give you criminals? I would just like to know. Especially interested in whether or not you think there was long-term damage. And if you haven't listened to me before, you know if you have a competing opinion, I am more than happy to entertain your opinion over what I've just presented to you. In fact, I want your opinion. Even if it is something different than what I might feel, I am interested in what you think about what I just said. Could you imagine yourself? Could you imagine yourself? You have been on a plantation, you and your ancestors have been on a plantation for 250 years. Most of your family lived and died on that plantation and never saw anything outside of it. You did not own your children. Your children belonged to the master. And frequently, one of the gifts the master gave to his kids who might be starting a home or a farm of their own, some of his slaves to work plantation. And you had no say-so about that. So if they wanted to take your son or your daughter and give it to their sons or their daughters for their development of their property, you were powerless. You couldn't get married unless it was approved by the master. All I'm asking for you to do is detach yourself for a minute and just try very hard to figure out how you would feel if you were in that position. Can any of you tell me? I would just like to know. Can you detach yourself enough that you could put yourself in that position and appreciate some of the trauma? I'm going to give you more trauma too when we go to Reconstruction, because there's plenty of things that happened there. And on this month, one of the things that are often said is that Black folks want handouts. And what I'm going to endeavor to show you over this month is that African Americans have been knocked down, set back over and over again, and they get back up and they get back in the fight, and always with a love of this country, always. Because what you have to understand, after 250 years on a plantation, America is their country. It is their country. One of the plans Lincoln proposed was a plan that would send slaves back to Africa. And he met with some of the major African-American leaders at that time, and they said no. They weren't African-American anymore. They weren't Africans anymore. They were Americans. And they were American in every aspect of their life, because this is where they lived, and this is where their children were born, even if they didn't have complete control of them and lost some of them due to being shipped off to other plantations or provided as gifts to their children. But always the same. They love this country. And one of the things that, again, that I want you to try to ingrain in you is, like me, I can find things about this country that deeply disturb me and that I would like to fix, but I am absolutely committed and would put my life on the line to protect America. And we got Winnie on line one. Yes, Winnie.
Rudy, two books that station. I had some Nat Turner movie. Birth of the Nation. Have y'all seen that before?
I saw the Nat Turner movie, yes.
It was harsh. At the end of the rainbow, they listen at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they did.
But that kind of rough, those kind of rough movie there. I didn't kind of like that too well. Like, what you think about that movie? What you think about his life story?
I thought that movie was very important for people to see, because it showed that African Americans were not completely docile as slaves, and they had a yearning for freedom too. So I think it was good. Now, the movie that you should see, I don't know if you saw it or not, is 12 Years a Slave.
Oh, yeah, 12 Years a Slave.
Did you see that?
I saw that.
That's the one.
Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman. I like it. So it was a good outcome with her.
Yeah.
Free the slave, but they never got lifted up. They never got hung, and they never, they never. It was a good outcome. I like a positive outcome with her movie.
Yeah.
Free the slave. Kind of the woman called Moses. Moses. Frederick Douglass. It was a good outcome on his end too. if they get caught and they get hanged and live. I like that so much better.
Yeah, yeah. But I think that, and you know, the 12 years a slave, that was a real story. He was a free man that got put on a plantation, and they turned him into a slave and kept him from his family for 12 years, because at that time, there was no such thing as justice for slaves, African Americans, which is why when I talked about the book that the man killed the people that raped his daughter, because he never thought that they would get fair treatment. And at that time, now we also got to remember now that at this particular point in time, they were also lynching people. They were lynching Black people. And I don't know of, now there could be, because I don't have a complete study on this, but I don't know anybody that ever was sentenced who did lynchings. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine how fearful they made Black folks, that they were, if they said the wrong thing or did the wrong thing or walked on the wrong side of the street, they could be picked up and lynched. They could be lynched even if something wasn't true, such as the Emmett Till story, as they've often talked about. If you haven't seen that, but that's a tragedy. But okay, I guess I don't have any callers, but I really had asked you to just detach and see what it must have felt like. I want you to get the feeling, okay, you're free. Now what? What do you do? Where do you start? What's your options? How do you survive that? Me being grown up in this era, I don't know that I could survive that. I think that maybe my natural survival skills might kick in, but just the thought of where that was at that time is just a horrific thought in my mind. And to see where African Americans are today from that, it's a miracle. It's a miracle. First, there was the slave ships, and they lost thousands and thousands of slaves coming across the ocean. Some jumped over ship, and some died due to the horrible unsanitary conditions of that. So you survive that. You get here, and then you are a slave. And you have to work as much as the master wants you to work, and you can't complain. The number again is 340-1590, 340-1590. So now you survived one trauma going across the sea. Now you go into slavery, and you do that for 250 years, and now all of a sudden you're free. Try very hard to understand that, and understand that African Americans are as American can get. We're Americans. They call me African American, but I am a Black man I am a Black man that is an American. I just happen to be Black. That's it. And I can't tell you the sense of pride that I have knowing what my ancestors had to overcome and the ongoing and continuous striving for rights and policies that are consistent for all people. And here's something else I want you to get, because this is important. Some of you get mad about, oh, what are they complaining about this complaint about that. All we are seeking, and I want you to hear this very clearly, is that America lives up to the words in the Constitution. That's it. I am looking for America to live up to the words in the Constitution. And what I told you in my little narrative about from slavery to freedom, there was laws in place that were ignored, completely ignored. In 1865, they created laws, ignored. So, again, I'm going to tell Cliff to take a little break. And when we come back, I'll take your calls, and that number is 340-1590. That's 340-1590.
Hi, this is Rudy Howard, your independent insurance agent. I now specialize in Medicare, health insurance, and small group insurance. That number is 475-8856. Same great service, more flexible hours. Just give me a call, 475-8856.
Two college games feature nationally ranked teams on the 18th. Illinois visits Indiana at 12 noon on WPSL, followed by WSTU's Westwood 1 game with Baylor and Kansas at 4 on WSTU. The best of college basketball is brought to you by Indian River State College Athletic Department, Nicer, the St. Lucie Draft House, Hoskins, Turco, Lloyd & Lloyd, Seacoast Air Conditioning, Max Stuckey, Stewart Estate Attorney, Stibbles of Stewart, and St. Lucie Battery and Tire.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
We now return you to the African American scene, and happy Black History Month to you. Once again, here's your host, the one and only Rudy Howard.
And I'm going to give you an opportunity to chime in on the President's State of the Union last night. What I will tell you is that if I was a Republican, after that fiasco last night that took place in the chamber, I would change parties, because I think it was absolutely embarrassing the way people acted. No class, no decorum whatsoever. And there's a continuing effort to paint Joe Biden as a bumbling old man who shouldn't be there, but that certainly wasn't the guy that was speaking last night. I thought he spoke very clearly. He gave us a picture of where he's trying to go, and he's trying to get everybody to go with him. He is really trying to make it bipartisan, which is contrary with what most progressives feel because of how President Obama was treated whenever he tried to do something bipartisan. I think he's had some success, as we know, in some of the laws that have been passed. So that is something to consider. So what if you have an opinion about President Biden's speech last night, State of the Union? I would like to hear it. Even if you think it was terrible. If you say it's terrible, I'd like to know why. So we need Miles's phone number.
So you can contact him about when the prize will be available.
Oh, okay. All right, Miles, you need to give us your phone number.
Oh, I got it. I sent it to you on the text right there.
Okay, all right, all right. Okay, so no calls about that either. Y'all are just really being quiet tonight. And that's okay. That's okay. I don't want to get into my next topic. I have something else I could talk to you about, but I won't be able to give it justice if I start on it at 6:45, and we'll be off at 7. It'll take much longer than 15 minutes to deal with the topic. I hope to have a couple of guests over this month. There's a reverend that I heard speak at Sunlight Community Church, and he was very dynamic, and I have asked him if he would come to my show, and he said he would. I have not heard that back from him yet. And then there's a young lady that wants to talk about the importance for women to have proper checkups, especially women of color who don't seem to be doing it in the manner in which it needs to be done for them to be safe and healthy. So, and I've talked to her twice, and we're just trying to get her lined up. Hopefully I'll have one or the other next Wednesday when we're on. In the meantime, again, I thought President Biden did an awesome job last night in his presentation. And I thought the behavior of the Republicans in the chamber, man, if you're old as I am, you can, in our lifetime, I don't remember people acting up, screaming and yelling at the president in the State of the Union like they're doing now. And it started with Joe Wilson and Obama. Otherwise, that is generally considered to be a time of solemn thought and listening to what the president says, even if you disagree. But this yelling out loud and calling him a liar, gee whiz. I don't know. I gotta tell you, I'd be pissed at my party if they did that. That's just not, and you have never seen a Democrat do that in the State of the Union, even though they may have had some strong feelings about what was going on. So I don't know. So, and I know there's a lot of my conservative friends out there listening, and they just don't want to register their opinion. But you should be ashamed of yourselves for being associated with people with that kind of behavior. That's just terrible. Marjorie Greene screaming liar in the State of the Union. Who does that?
Up until now, the ones who would agree with what is said in the State of the Union address would all clap, while the others would sit on their hands, and that's as out of line as they got. Up till these days now, it's a whole lot different now. Wow,
it is. You know and you know in the chamber, there is a certain decorum that should be followed, which I don't think is much to ask, to do just what you're saying. If you don't like what was said, sit on your hands. Don't stand up. That's okay. They've been doing that a long time. That's okay. That's registering a protest without screaming out in the chamber, that's tacky. I don't know.
I wonder if there are any penalties for that.
No, I don't think so. I think one of the things I learned about through President Trump, a lot of things that we thought were laws were customs that we followed without interruption. And when he decided not to do them, he didn't break a law. So we've had to take a good look at some of the things that we accepted as a tradition and consider putting some laws associated with that. And I think that's a shame, but I don't know that there's any other way to deal with those issues other than to create laws and legislation that makes folks act within the scope of those laws. And that goes for elected officials. I'm talking about some of the stuff for elected officials too. That kind of got ignored and set to the side with President Trump. So, okay, so you have no opinion at all about what President Biden said. I'm going to say this though, and this is kind of an important thing to consider. And I heard all of the political commentators talking about this. They're talking about cuts to the budget, but won't tell anybody what cuts. They just saying we're not going to approve the debt limit raise without making cuts. Okay, I can understand that you want to get the budget down so we can have like a surplus that Bill Clinton gave President Bush. But what are you going to cut? I haven't heard anything. And you know what? He is 100% right. If you're not willing to say what's at stake for the cuts and you want him to sit down and talk to you, he would be crazy to do that. Because that's like bullying. That's not trying to create a piece of legislation or budget cuts that help the American people. That's just, I want my way. And if I don't get my way, then I'm going to say you're unreasonable. And we're reasonable because we're trying to balance the budget. What a bunch of hooey. That's just hooey. You raised the debt limit under Trump numerous times. And now all of a sudden, you become budget conscious, and it's always the same thing. When Democrats take control, all of a sudden the budget becomes a big issue. And when Republicans are in control, some of them spend out of their blasted mind. George Bush was a spender that I heard many Republicans complain about his spending. But now all of a sudden we got President Biden, and we have an emergency. We have to cut the budget. Do I think there are things? Now let me say something that I can agree with you with. Do I think there's some things that can be trimmed in the budget? Absolutely. But what I would like to say is, if there is that trimming of the budget, I would like some of those resources to be reallocated to some very worthy causes, such as the preschool program where they raised thousands of kids out of poverty. I would like to see that go back into effect. I think it's about to expire, or it has expired. So, yeah, I'll agree with you. There's probably some fat in the budget that could be trimmed. And I'm not opposed to that because, like President Biden said last night, and I am in 100% agreement, I am a capitalist too. I'm not a socialist. I believe in capitalism. I think our capitalism is out of control. And I think there's some brake stops that need to be put on it. And I think there needs to be some equilibrium in terms of how they are handling their profits with respect to their employees. I think that's something that can be done. And you can do that and not be a socialist. If you want to trim and you want to make allocations to programs that you think have a demonstrated positive outcome, that's not socialism. Health insurance, you want to make socialism? That's not socialism. We're one of the richest countries in the world, and we still don't have a full health insurance plan for all the American people. Now, certainly, the Affordable Care Act has taken us a long ways toward that and eliminated a lot of uninsured people. But I don't see any reason why this country cannot afford health insurance for all of its people. Other countries do it, and I understand that it is potentially another tax, but I would more than happy to pay for it in order for my American people to get proper health coverage. And I would like to say thank you. You awfully quiet tonight for listening to the African American scene. God bless and be safe. And I will see you next Wednesday for the African American scene.
With archives on YouTube, the African American scene has quite a few Februarys. You can go back and look at other instances where during Black History Month, the way it's celebrated on this show, very educational, and you'll love each and every program. So check it out. Wednesday evenings, back to Wednesdays in the 6 o'clock hour on YouTube under WPSL TV. It's Rudy Howard's African American scene on WPSL, Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.